There it is. Okay. Well, good. And I'll walk you through later how to like retrieve that and send it to the right people. So, all right. So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Advisory Committee on Transportation Choices January 5th, 2022 meeting, being recorded and available to the public through Microsoft Teams, and is allowed to do so by a waiver of due to a local emergency. My name is Josh Fulb. I am chair of this committee. Happy New Year to all. One thing I'd like to do is, so the virtual meeting protocol here is Lauren is currently our staff liaison, as Kristen Haldeman has gone off to greener pastures, and I wish her more than the best. So, and if you talk to Kristen on the side, please do wish her the best as she goes on to her next adventure. And so we have the first order of business here is to approve the November minutes. I sent those out to you all and asked you to take a skim over them. And what I'll do is give about a minute in case anyone needs one last chance to look at it, and then I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda and the minutes at the same time. Kind of do a twofer.
I will approve to. I will move to approve the minutes and the agenda.
I'll second.
So that was moved by Jillian and approved and seconded by, was that John Carden?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. If you can just go into the chat and say either aye or nay. If you cannot go into the chat, and you can just say, we'll go all in favor. If you can go in the chat and say aye, or you can give a thumbs up sign.
Aye.
That was GMR.
Aye.
And Armstrong said aye.
Aye.
Aye. John Carden.
Okay. John Carden, I got an aye. Thank you. Who else? Someone else was said at the same time. I believe we have enough. So, okay. So thank you all. I believe, Lauren, we have done that. So I need someone willing to take minutes for the to take minutes of the meeting. Is there someone who'd be willing to take minutes for the meeting? And they do not need to be detailed. They just need to talk about the very high level we've done, because that was something Kristen used to do. And I really don't want to ask Lauren, who's doing her job and another job, to take on two things. Lauren, I may just have to help you afterwards, and together we can kind of figure it out. We'll just,
we got this. No worries.
Yeah, you can just take the agenda and just, what, Jillian?
I can do it for this one. I can't promise that I can do it for all of them, but I can do it for this one. And if either Lauren or Josh has this in Word, has the agenda in Word, and wants to shoot it to make that a little easier, that would be great. Thanks.
I don't, but I can create a Word document in like 5 seconds here and send it to you right now, if that would be easier.
That would be great. Okay, so I'll take the minutes for this one. Thank you.
Okay, well, I can send it to you like
Julie.
right. Hang on, give me 5 seconds to do this here, and we will have this. I have no problem doing this. Okay, I will send this to you right now, because we are all in this together, right? That. And Jillian, that should be to you right now. All right, so what we have here, and this is going to take a few minutes now, and what I'm trying to figure out is the best way to do this. One idea I had was to break up, and I just got an email. Dave McBride is unable to make it tonight, so there's that. Okay. The is to take these PIPs that I sent to you and we break them up into mini committees who become experts on it to bring feedback based on our committee, or we can take them one at a time. And what I'll do is I will change my screen share to be these PIPs. All right. So these were the PIPs that we were asked to take a look at, and I sent them to you all. It is kind of hard to try to do these individually, and so what I was wondering is, and I'm trying to think of a good way as chair to do this, because if I was in class, I would say, okay, everybody, what I'll do is put you into breakout groups, and then what we do is, and then have each person report out. What I'm wondering is, are there a couple members of this committee who would actually be interested in taking a deep dive into these PIPs? What I'm told from one of Kristen's last things she told to me was some of these policies got paused for a little bit as they were looking for a shepherd to, they're having to rearrange who's shepherding these PIPs through. So is there anyone who has an interest in forming a couple of people who'd be willing to meet on the side to talk about these PIPs, like read through them together and make any comments? And it's also important to say that some of these, some of these, it doesn't require commentary. We might find things that aren't relevant to, we might find things that aren't relevant to make comments on, or that we're perfectly happy with them. So that's part of our job here, and a distinction to make for us is that policies are the province of the school system, of the school board, and the PIPs, which is like it stands for the policy implementation procedure, is what's owned by the superintendent. The high level, the way to think of it is the policy is the high level guardrails, and then the PIPs are like the street map within it of how things will work. So do we have anyone who are on, not asking our staff people to do this because that's not something that they would be have on them, but is there a couple people who'd be willing to take a deep dive out of the committee into these 4 PIPs and then just bring back their commentary to the next meeting? And then, since I'm told it's paused for a little bit, we can then submit our feedback that way.
Hey, Josh, I have a comment, and that
Okay.
is, in reading through these, there's a lot of detail in them, which is really good. I would think probably the best people to look at these would be people that have kids close to the age groups or activity groupings that we have here to look at them, because they would probably know and better than someone like me that's got kids that are out of the school now. But there's a lot of good detail in there. But I have one question, that is how these rules get communicated to the students.
So my experience on the parent side and the school side is, back in the day, it used to be in the student handbook. And some of the student handbooks have gone virtual, but not in, their answer, of course, is they're available on the APS website for anyone to view. But the specifics of them, like the ones of, if I can find very quickly, never find the thing you're looking for. The thing that's like the rules of what kids will, nope. Student transportation, general, this one. Never can I find it right on time. There was one of them that had like this right here. So like this would be put in a student handbook for students to know. Okay. So, John, you make a very valid point on this, and I appreciate that. I could start naming names, and I would hate to start doing that, but are there a couple of people who might, for which this would apply to them, be willing to read through them and have a little group call and like I said, it's also possible that you read through them and be like, I have no complaints, or you think that something that's being deleted should not be deleted, or that you think that there should be some extra verbiage based on what's going on.
Josh, this is John Armstrong. I can be part of a group that looks at elementary school and or middle school.
I appreciate. So the way it breaks into, so it's general ed versus special ed, athletic and student. So your middle high school, Jillian, would you be willing to work with John, because you've got elementary aged?
Yeah, I was about to raise my hand as well.
Okay. Is there a third that would like to go in on these? And like I said, we don't need to submit like books on this. It's possible, it's possible that we just say, hey, we think this should be a little more robust, or this needs to be, we don't have to write the policy. We just have to give our feedback on it. So, John and Julia, and also committees of too many people sometimes make for harder work, not necessarily better work. So if John and Jillian, if you all are so willing, I thank you. And at some point when the pandemic is not raging, I will buy both of you all a cup of coffee at the place of your choosing.
Sounds great.
So just, I don't know if this is something that the committee wants to talk through. The big thing that jumped out at me, and I took some notes and I can't open them right now, so I'm going a little bit off of memory. But the big thing that jumped out at me is one thing that has come up this year is standards for bus stops, where they're cited, sort of the standards for the hub stops, how they're laid out. And those aren't really in the PIP. And I think in the draft, there was a little bit about something about efficient routing.
There was mention of hub stops in one of the documents.
So what
I don't think it was like hub stops should be in places where large numbers of children should gather. Hub stops should not have more than.
Actually, no, Jillian, it does cover that. So
it has a maximum.
It has some more. I mean, it has more detailed information, like you're suggesting. So I don't know if it'll suffice for what you're asking about.
I think from our committee, since I think if you read through that and you see something's missing, I would be real hesitant for us to say, it should have no more than 28 or 31 or 107. I wouldn't put a number to it, but that we could say something like, we think there should be a thoughtful and reasoned cap to the number of students in a location, or something like that, or that the cap should be made proportional to the space in which the children would be asked to stand. Something right. Like that. And that right. Would be reasonable, but just go ahead.
That's fine. There isn't. So it did come up. There isn't a maximum. There is a minimum for neighborhood bus stops.
Okay.
But there's very, like for the hub stops, doesn't even call them hub stops. And it basically just says they'll be in centralized locations chosen for efficient routing of buses, which I think we've had a lot of issues with with bus stops. And I think if we could just have a more transparent discussion in the community about what makes sense for bus stops generally, then we wrote those down, we can avoid what seems to be an annual issue of people sort of at the beginning of the school year saying, I don't like my bus stop, and then petitioning for their bus stop to be moved. It's almost like we should, a lot of times, the issue is one that could very well be sort of seen well ahead of time.
And actually, Jillian, I met with Dave Pretty today talking actually about hub stops and bus stops. And one of the things we talked about was, and this might be something to add into the commentary, was that like there was a situation in which a hub stop was placed and then there was a major construction project that then made that hub stop unusable, and how we would love to see that something in the policy that coordination on hub stops is made with the county. And Dennis, I might lean in on you on how that might work if, as we're starting to create these bus stops that are larger, that how there might be something in the permitting process. And Dave Pretty and I were just having a really high level conversation about this, of what that might look like in coordinating between the county and the schools on knowing where the placement of hub stops are, in turn, and as building projects might get placed. I don't know how that would work.
And I think that to DES's credit and to the county's credit, they're actually working, they have a lot of their projects on maps.
Yes.
That members of the public can look at, but also members of the school system. And then maybe there can even be a back-end solution where the hub stops are put into their GIS system so they know to alert the school system.
So if you can scribble that into your notes.
Yep, absolutely.
That would be fabulous. But thank you all.
Okay, just wanted to make sure the committee was comfortable with this going in that direction of having more in the PIP about what hub stops should be. Now, it's about efficient routing, but it's not only about efficient routing. They have to be safe and they have to be close enough for children to actually use them. And that one of the metrics of their success should be use, and specifically not car use. That if we see a lot of people driving to schools, we should consider that not to be a success.
So you obviously what you'll do is you'll put your thoughts together. What my hope would be that you'd have them together maybe 2 weeks before the next meeting in March, and then I could email them out and say, folks, come with your thoughts on this, and then we'll approve them as a group and send them out. So we'll put this back.
So we don't need to have feedback to APS before.
I'm told, so I need to get the exact timing. And if I need to do this over email, I'll figure out the way to do it. But I was told that these had been paused somewhat, that they weren't as time critical. Because I don't know if the person left who was shepherding them through, or they've become other issues that become the priority. So
gotcha.
I will get some more clarity on that. But if you, as you are reading it, to the rest of the committee, as you're reading this, if you find things that are of concern or interest to you, if you would shoot an email to Jillian or John and say, hey, might maybe consider including that. Jillian and John, would you guys put your emails in the chat? And that way the committee has them if you have a preferred email for that.
Also, if I think special ed transportation is the one where I feel the least able to speak.
And I will. I have a little bit of experience on special ed transportation. Loop me in when you guys talk, and I will offer my thoughts.
Cool. Great. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, cool. And let me get back to our agenda. And we have the bell time project scope of work. So what I want to do is I'm going to share that with you. Lauren, are we looking for feedback? Are we just trying to make the committee aware of this?
I think it's basically consolidating committee feedback based on what Kristen provided in the PowerPoint.
Okay. So,
and then I'm supposed to take whatever we've heard and forward it on to Kim Wilkes and Kathy
okay.
Lynn.
Okay. Well, thank you. So, let me make sure I'm sharing the right thing. Do this. Okay. So, Lauren, do you want me to run through this, or are you able to? Do you have
Why don't you go ahead, Josh? I can.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
I can take notes.
So, what I think we briefly talked about in this committee. We've seen it before, and this committee has actually approved motions in past years that we would be interested in using the bell times to make the buses more efficient. Let me see what's on here before I don't want to pontificate twice. So, so they're looking for how could they adjust these bell schedules in such a way to use the buses more efficiently, because the ideal situation is a bus is used 3 times in the morning in elementary, middle, and high school, or if you staggered things somehow, that you're coordinating such a way that a bus can do 3 runs in the morning, and then in a dream world 4 in the afternoon, where the 4th being an athletic transportation. So, they're securing a consultant. They've started in January. They're looking for a technical advisory team. So I always love this phrase. They're looking for stakeholder group feedback during the project to discuss service rules, being the earliest pickup drop-off times we tolerate, bell time constraints, performance, and discuss the results. I realize I'm just reading this to you. And discuss the results of analysis. And they're looking at getting feedback from inside outside groups. And I think some of the things that's important is, and certainly, 5 minutes of a change of a school or 10 minutes of a change of a school is not as significant as a change that might mean that a school that used to start at, I'm just throwing a time out, used to be an 8:10 start is a 9 o'clock start or something like that. And so the other part of it is saying, well, what is the earliest pickup and drop off times that this community could accept? I would think this committee could agree that 5:30 in the morning would be an inappropriate start time to pick kids up. And we certainly don't want to be dropping kids off at 10 o'clock at night. So they'll obviously pick 2 extremes, but getting it narrowed down to what is it that the community would tolerate. So objectives, which, as you're going to see, is a not small project. Overall routing efficiency, limiting ride times, reduce the number of bell times and rationalize the tiers. Ensure the time between tiers allows for the most efficient use of buses in the morning and the afternoon. Balancing the buses and drivers. Once again, this gets back to that idea of being able to put more miles on the buses for more runs. Reduce the number of buses used each year, increase the bus availability. And this is important for after high school athletic needs, including potentially creating another tier. So talking about that 4th in the afternoon. I will pontificate for a moment that you will see that we are using outside contractors in Arlington, and there are tour buses that show up to take some of the teams that leave earlier than we can provide yellow bus service for. Ensure the high school start end times align with the VHSL sports needs, and create minimum disruption to family. And this is important, right? Talking about an elementary time going from 8 o'clock to 10:30 could be too much of a lift.
And a follow-on question on that last point, I remember Kristen saying, is whether that should be a goal in itself, and if it conflicts with other goals, and should we weight some of the goals and objectives? So that was one thing I remember.
Yeah, it's yeah, and so that, yeah, right, because, and I guess I've had this discussion over the years, and Jillian, I see your hand. I'm going to run through the last 4 parts, and then we'll take the feedback. That we're talking about is, you move into a neighborhood and it has a school and it has a time. Well, do you have a property right to that start time? And so I think that's probably where the question is. But obviously, nobody operates in a vacuum, right? That, the schools we have to make sure that the service works as well too. So the relevance of a previous study. So objective and performance measures, service rules, earliest and latest drop-off time, bell time constraints, once again, making sure that things work with sports. So, Lauren, what we're looking for here are thoughts and feedback. Is that what you're hoping to get with?
Yes, yeah, and just kind of preliminary information to provide to folks in transportation. And then I think ultimately, if anyone from the committee would like to volunteer to be part of that technical advisory team. I think there are 6 stakeholder events altogether. But other than that, I don't know too many parameters. So mainly today, it's more the discussion and initial feedback and thoughts.
Okay, so Lauren, since you're the one who has to take the feedback back, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off my camera. Would you turn yours on? Since you're the one who has to make sense of this, I think you should drive this part of the conversation.
Okay. Well, basically, I mean, you walk through the different factors that are under consideration. So the main discussion is really what are the takeaways? What do you feel? What are the pros and cons? What are the specifics that were laid out here? Are there any particular areas of concern, suggestions, and so on?
So let's start with Jillian. Why don't you give your first level of feedback, and we'll run through things and see what people have.
Thanks. Thank you so much. So I'm very excited about this project generally, but I'm a little concerned that 2 things are missing. One is the educational impact, the impact on instruction. I would think that's our first priority as a school system. In particular, because of all the research that shows that children's brains act differently in the morning depending on their age. And so that would be relevant to any bell time discussion. And I think we should lead with that. And then the second thing is the impact on working families, especially because I think our region has mostly families where primary caregiver who does not work significant hours. And so that matters a lot, but it also is relevant to the study. For example, if we're providing an extended day for elementary school that starts at 7 p.m. or 7 a.m., does it just make more sense to have elementary schools start at 7:30 and offer early or morning recess or some sort of drop off for all students at 7, eliminating the need for morning extended day? You would probably need the same number of hours in total of extended day, but it actually makes it easier to recruit staff if you're not recruiting staff to work a couple hours in the morning and then hours in the afternoon. If it's all in the afternoon, it should be easier to recruit staff for that. Things like that, I think, are important to just the logistics
and
of how this works for families. I think it's actually way more important than the consistency of bell times year over year. I think, especially when we're talking about a one-time change. If we were talking about changes every year, that would be one thing. But if I think if you change, and I speak say this coming from the immersion community where Claremont's bell time did change significantly this year. And you know what? It was fine. People dealt with it. I don't think the school system heard a lot about it because it was well reasoned. It was communicated ahead of time, with enough time. And then the last point here is just to make sure that any changes are finalized with enough lead time before the next year. I know that there's a whole ecosystem of services for families that depend on this schedule. And I don't know if Chris Slatt is on, but he knows very personally about, dance studios and taekwondo and tutoring centers and gymnastics. All of those things depend on this schedule. And so if this study isn't going to wrap up until into the spring, then APS should consider implementing it the following fall, because everybody else is going to set all these private firms are setting their schedules. Honestly, they've started now to set their schedules for next fall.
So you're saying if it's not completed by spring, it should not be for this fall, or you're saying if it's completed by spring, that fall would be okay?
I mean, it would have to be early spring, and I would try to message out to the businesses as soon as possible, because I know that because they have staff to deal with, right? They're juggling their limited space and trying to assign things out, trying to make sure they have everything staffed up. And this is true of things like dance and gymnastics, things like tutoring, and then also all the daycare that helps with elementary school. So there's lots of different moving pieces there. My biggest exposure to it is through what my own kids do, and I know that they're just in the early phases, and it would be early spring that they would need sort of a final answer on. But I would go ahead and reach out to the business community directly to figure out when they need an answer by. And it might just be better to do this now for implementation in the following fall to give everyone, and then we can start with a clean slate and not have to worry about how much we need to change. Because I think if we look at the instructional needs to really honor what is best for instruction, we need to make some big changes.
Well, thank you. Other thoughts on this too? And then Jillian, I know usually when you hear things, it inspires other things. So other people from the committee, maybe people have done kinds of this stuff before. Our friends at the county, this matters to you. Does how the bus times play out affect things on your side as well?
So even
Josh, the only thing I'll mention, this is Dennis, is that the bell times do affect whether students can in fact take public transit to school.
Right.
And how much time would public, and this matters, actually hugely, Dennis, now that I'm thinking about this, I think we have who's here from ART?
William Jones.
Mr. Jones, how much time in coordination would you need if you wanted to adjust some ART schedules to make things work? Because this does matter hugely. What kind of process and timeline would you need? Could you speak to that for a minute? Because that's actually, I'm glad, Dennis, you said that. And I'm glad. So, Mr. Jones, if you'll speak to that for a minute, because that is hugely important to this.
So good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year. Part of the challenge right now is that because of the numbers of individuals who are actually taking transit, it's not, I don't know off the top of my head, but I do know that last time we checked, we had maybe close to 2,000 trips a month that were under student fares using transit. Don't quote me on it, it's approximate. And so I know that you have a larger number of students who are using school bus transportation to journey to school. So with the rush hour period starting as early as 6 and running through 9 on a given weekday, I don't see too much in the way of changes. We do have one thing that we do, particularly with the Arlington Mill neighborhood and Kenmore Middle School. So that's one thing that we would look into. And there are other efforts that we're going to have to look into as we're moving forward. So any decisions that are made in terms of that, there may be some opportunities to line things up, but particularly during the time of the bell times, the frequencies between buses or the times between buses are pretty much set between us and Metrobus. And so from that perspective, we have a little ways to go. As we get further down in the in this evening's meeting, there may be a little bit more to speak to it, because what we need to really understand is it's not just the bell times in the bus route in which the student would get off the bus to walk to the campus. It's where they're starting from. And so there's some planning exercises at a very high level that will need to be sorted out and sorted through to understand where's that student walking from? What is that bus stop? What is that bus route? Is it one bus? Is it two buses? Those things are things that have to be sorted out. And so as we have an item on a presentation for which I'm here along with Mr. Leach and Ms. Lynn Rivers, and we can talk about that at that time. But what I would say, those are two key important things that we would need to know in order to better understand if there is some dramatic change. We have routes that run between 15 to 20 minutes, 10 to 20 minutes during the rush hour period. So anytime between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m., those schedules are pretty set. So we wouldn't have to make too much of an adjustment just because the time between the buses. It'll be just a matter of from where the student is starting from to where their destination would be. You work backwards. If the bell time is 8:15 and I live in South Fairlington and I have to get to Wakefield High, trip plan that out and figure out, okay, if it's 8:15, work backwards. What's the bus that'll put me there at Wakefield by 8:15? If I had to take two buses, when does that trip leave? Wherever, what Metro bus I need to take from South Fairlington to get to Shirlington, what bus I need to take from Shirlington to get to Wakefield, and that student would have, student and parent would have to work that out. So, sorry I took more than 1 minute on that, but there are more factors in that. So in terms of timing, I don't see that as a big thing, primarily just because the way things are set up in those factors that I threw out there. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of help on that, but
Well, I think also the idea of these different objectives and performance measures and what are some more equal than others, as they say, what are the most important variables to consider? Are we looking at the whole universe of impacts and weighing that as more important than, I don't know, the kind of the number of buses and drivers and that, all of that, or how do you see all these factors being equal, I guess?
Hold on, just let me get Alice.
Maybe go back to the objectives and performance measures slide to
this
refresh. Yeah.
So are you wanting us to rank them, or what do you like?
No, I'm saying, should they be ranked, or are they all equal?
Right. I obviously I don't think, and I'll take thoughts from the committee here. I don't know if we would consider them all equal. But like, obviously some things have to happen with more priority than another. John, and then Jillian.
I'll just say, some are givens, like ensure high school start end times align with the Virginia High School League sports schedule. So some of them, like a linear programming project here, where there are certain givens that you have to stay within. And then others are more flexible and, you do what you can.
Jillian?
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, in my mind, number one is the instructional needs of students, instructional and mental health, which I would actually put sports and these other activities into. I think those are needs of students, and I think they should be our first priority as a school system. And then the second priority is, I think, being efficient, having an efficient delivery of the service in a way that does not lead to more people driving to school. And a lot of these other performance measures sort of go to efficiency in different ways. And I think the way to think of them all together is efficiency, not just routing efficiency, but minimizing the cost of the whole system and minimizing the number of cars that go to school. And then the disruption to families, I think, is the last.
Would you say that
we need
some
to
of
worry about.
the communications that you're talking about falls under minimal disruption?
Right.
Getting that out
exactly.
as far as possible and looking at everyone affected.
Right. I mean, if this just said minimal disruption to families and staff, period, that I could get behind. But that's not because of the change of start and end times. Families are disruptive when it's a sudden change, an unexpected change, or a change that really makes it hard. Like if you changed it so that elementary schools started at, I'm just throwing it out there, 8:30, and you couldn't really do a morning extended day, but it was still late enough that people needed half an hour of morning care, and you weren't providing that half an hour of morning care. That's a big change. But as long as working families can get care from when they need to get to work to when they get home from work, even if it shifts to the school day starts earlier for elementary and then all of it is extended day, that's fine. That's not a disruption for most families. In fact, it's probably better for most families because they'll be actually putting their kid on the school bus to go to school before they go to work. And then they only have to pick them up at the end of the day. So actually, going back to the minimizing number of car trips to school, which I think should always be one of our goals when we talk about transportation, I think that would be a bonus.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, Josh. This is Cecilia. Hi.
Hey, Cecilia. Thank you.
I just so everybody knows, it's Cecilia Stapella. I'm actually the liaison to you guys from the FACT. And I just wanted to comment that and before that I was on the Budget Advisory Council, and in both of those, this issue of when Kristen started doing her planning, I feel like, I could be wrong, but I feel like she did do an exercise to look at how kind of what was maybe not a hierarchy. I don't know if it was so much as weighting different factors, but identifying sort of what were the most important factors to look at in terms of the hub stops. And I'm just wondering if that was done, we can look at that for the bell times.
I can check into that. I think Kim Wilkes might be able to provide some information on that too.
So Cecilia, your hand is still up. Do you have more to add, or you just the hand was just up?
No, I didn't put my hand down.
Oh, and I see John. And
Yeah.
by the way, I don't know if your phones have buzzed. APS just made a change of service for tomorrow.
What?
I retract I love school snow days. We got the note. Yep.
Is it
And this
closed?
actually wasn't ending up a snow day, unfortunately. This is the same fate the county was facing with snowplow drivers, is that they don't have the staffing right now. People are sick. And Lynn is joining us. So, John?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I know there's been a lot of previous work done on this in a lot of different communities. So it seemed like the search of the literature would certainly provide some good insights on best practices and techniques and, experiences that other communities have had in trying to, figure out the best bell times, to suit all these needs, which, is really a software project that, that can be looked at. But just a search of the literature, I think, would probably give us some good ideas about what other people have considered and what's worked best and been most meaningful in their communities.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think this is good to get back to Kim, unless there's anybody else who has something to add or share. Or...
Anyone, last thoughts, last round here? And Lauren, thank you for driving this one for us.
Sure, and feel free to email me if you have anything else you think of. I'll probably try to get something together for them by Friday.
Thank you. All right, let me go back to oops, I realized my mic was off. I was realizing that a year ago, if we were going to the date, we had to reschedule last year's meeting because January 6th happened and too many of our friends on the county side were involved in operations. So thank you all for everything you did back then. And let's go on now to, we are on, and keeping pretty close to on time, the Coordinated Countywide Transportation Safety Campaign. Who's driving this one for us, Lauren?
I honestly don't have any. I thought we were going to have some conversation from Jim Larson from ACCS, since it was going to extend from the PAL campaign, but I don't know if Jim's on.
Yeah, I see Zara's here. Zara, are you a part of that too, or Dennis?
Yeah, actually, Lauren, I will start this off. So as part of our Vision Zero Action Plan implementation, transportation safety communications is part of that program. And we certainly got feedback from APS and from others about sort of behaviors, particularly around schools, and the need for more assertive communication around safety. And we went back and looked at some of the materials that you had worked on back in the 2013-2014 timeframe, where ACCS launched the PAL campaign, Be Predictable, Alert, and Lawful. It was a campaign that was a joint effort of ACCS, DOT, as well as Arlington Police Department and schools. There were videos produced that really highlighted transportation by all modes, pedestrians, cyclists, motorists. Sometimes the videos were very clever in that they were the same person and really trying to communicate that this could be you. So our ACCS team has actually pulled all that archive of materials. We're looking at it and really trying to weave it into a program that we hope to launch either later in the winter or early spring. And I'm going to turn it over to Zara or Hui if they want to add anything. But that's the gist of it.
Thank you. Zara, Hui, did you want to throw something else in on this?
Dennis pretty much summarized the effort and everything. I just want to remind everyone that we do keep a close eye on the crash experience in the county. I can tell you last Wednesday, my phone keeps buzzing and I counted more than 6 crashes in a day. And it's never a good feeling when you're in the business of transportation and safety. So I think it's very urgent for us to push out this public campaign and remind people of driving safely. And when you have any conversation with your friends at your gathering, please do spread the word. And we need everyone to really put up their best behavior, both as drivers and also as pedestrian and other mode users.
Thank you, Wei. It is always a good measure to be talking about that, definitely.
I do just want to add from the APS side that Frank Bellavia, who with School and Community Relations, and I have talked about how we will support pushing out whatever creative materials and whatever messaging is going on so that it's all concerted effort and coordinated. So that's where we're on board with that through the various channels, through School Talk and websites and various communications through APS, so, and PTAs as well.
Lauren, and we really do appreciate that. So I think that covers that item.
Jillian, did you have something to add?
I would add that, you know, since we're talking about schools, this seems like one of those areas that would be ripe for some sort of student created content. I know that has been successful in other places around both safety messaging and climate related messaging, sustainability related messaging, but throwing it out to the students to say, hey students, what around this school, around, you know, in this particular location is a problem? What's the behavior that you see to be a problem? And how can we message that it should be fixed? Which is, you know, in some ways the messages are similar, but sometimes the issues are specific to, you know, or some of the issues are specific to the location and some of the solutions are specific to the community. So maybe that's something that APS could look at from an instructional side, you know, cute little competition. You submit
we actually we did do a PSA contest a few years ago with Safe Routes to School called Heads Up, and we got about 20 different entries, and it was all done through Safe Routes. But if we were able to get buy-in at the instructional level or have it be done by school PTAs or whatever, so that there's actual localized promotion of it. But I think that's a great idea. We got some good stuff. We got some print and video ads, so, and we use them and people have borrowed them for different school use. But I think that's a great idea, especially if it's done from the top down rather than from just kind of a localized effort. So.
And sometimes the PTAs are just looking for ideas for something like this. Like I'm involved with a key PTA, I can call them up, but maybe if during this coordinated messaging, you guys could spread that idea to the PTA of maybe working with the kids to develop something, or working with the parents to develop specific to the school, because I think that will be even more effective than the cute videos that were done when the PAL campaign was kicked off. But and I meant to say, I love this, love Vision Zero, yay! Very, very happy that you guys are putting more emphasis on this, and thank you to everyone in the county and everyone in the schools putting more emphasis here.
Well, thank you for that. And you know, this coordinated thing is awesome. And I am also excited for this next thing, the free transit initiative. So who is driving the bus on this one? Quite literally driving the bus. Sorry, Lynn, I couldn't resist.
I know you couldn't. I love that pun. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Lynn Rivers here, excuse me, Transit Bureau Chief, and I've got William Jones here, who's the Transit Services Manager. We're driving the bus for the student pilot, and just wanted to share an update with you on where we are. And Lauren, I don't know if you need to allow me to share the screen. I've got a few slides for us to go through.
I think that's Josh who's doing that.
Okay, Josh.
I'm off now. Now, hold on. Lynn, who'd you say I need to change it? Lynn, you want to present, did you say, or do you want Mr. Jones
Yes.
to? Okay.
Either one. I can put the slides up.
All right, so hold on. Oh no, you should be able to. You should be able to go to the left of, because right now I have you as a participant. Yep, there you go.
There we go. There we go. All right, let me close this out. So this is an update, and William, please feel free to jump in as well. An update about the what we call the student fareless transit pilot. We've been doing quite a bit of groundwork since the initiative was proposed and approved by the board. So just wanted to update you on where we are right now. And just the basics about the pilot. Excuse me, there are 2,400 students that have been identified, middle and high school students that will receive preloaded iRide cards. The pilot is an 18-month pilot, but there may be various phases as we go through the 18 months, but will be driven, no pun intended, by the experiences and the data that we collect as we move along. And the whole reason for the pilot is to, number one, to inform the decisions we need to make operationally about how we can eventually get to free transit for APS students. So this is a very critical first approach that we have to actually do in order to make sure we can successfully move into allowing all students to ride for free. And the other piece of this as well is we are going to conduct an overall fare study this summer. I forgot we're in 22 already. And the fare study is to help us identify the types of fares that we need overall for the art system. And obviously incorporating student travel is a big part of that as well. And so here we are now with regards to the pilot. Excuse me. We have been working with WMATA with regards to getting the cards for distribution. As I mentioned earlier, we will be using the iRide cards, and we will load them with the fares that can be used by the students, and essentially making their travel free. Our plan is to send out letters and information to the pilot participants. We are able to identify with the assistance of our friends with APS on the students that will be a part of this program. And just to remind you, the students that have been targeted are those who now are using the school bus consolidated or hub stops. That are attending the immersion programs at schools that are outside of their home school boundary, the Montessori program, and those who are on the very fringes of those walk zones where there are no school bus. So this allows us to have a larger number of participants. You know, we're really piggybacking off of what Kristen started. And so there were a number of students that participated in this. This will probably be about 10 times more, maybe more than that, than the original pilot, but it's enough for us to handle to determine how we move forward in making a successful program, to shift to a successful overall program. And in order to get the cards distributed, we were going to be working with ACCS, and we'll work with the schools and setting up times for students to actually pick up their cards and get them registered. And then the final thing, we're keeping our fingers crossed, no more snow days or anything else, and we will be preparing for distribution to begin on February 1st. They may not roll out all 2,400 on one day, but We are targeting to start February 1, and as soon as a student gets the card in their hand, they can begin riding the bus. And this is just to give you an idea of how we want to check in with you, to let you know how things are going. With a February start, we intend to come back in the May timeframe to give you some idea on the initial data that we're receiving as far as students' usage of the cards. Then in September, we will also come back to talk about the fall semester and update you with other information. In particular, we think we'll be starting the FAIR study over the course of the summer, so we can talk a little bit about that, but we'll focus more on sharing our FAIR study update in January of 23. And then in May of 23, we'll come back with a what will be a pilot update. We'll be close to the end of the pilot period, and then we will talk about what the next phase will look like and what that feasibility looks like. And so that's where we are right now. We're moving ahead and anticipate getting some information out soon, so the students will know who they are. They're a part of this important pilot, and we'll be going from there. And I think that's all I have here. Opening it up for questions.
So we'll start with John.
Yeah, my comment here is I'm excited to see this program, and I'm excited to see how the ridership changes over time as the students get the cards and then they see their friends are using them and they decide, well, I want to ride with my friends, and so I'm curious to see how the momentum works here. But I'm hopeful it's going to be really a good plus and a good way to get them introduced to public transit and get them enthusiastic about riding the big people's bus, rather than the school bus.
Thank you.
Jillian?
Thank you. So I am so very excited about this program. And you guys know that I've been excited about getting kids on transit for a very long time, pushing it since my now 9-year-old was a tiny baby. And I was so excited to get this. As you know, I went and testified in front of the board in support of allocating the funding, but with the big caveat that what has been laid out, or what was laid out before, was not clear and was not inclusive. And I was very excited at the board meeting to hear multiple board members, I believe 3, but at least 2, echo those concerns that what was said was not clear and was not inclusive enough. And what I'm hearing is that how this is going to be implemented is going to be the same thing as what was proposed and what was specifically discussed at the board table, which is it worries me, because I fear that we're not setting ourselves up for success. It sounds like you've identified individual students now, regardless of whether they want this or not. Is that correct?
We have identified students, and this has come really from the recommendation from APS, and we work very closely with Kristen on this, focusing on those students who really are ripe at this point for using and needing public transit. And so that's why we've identified those particular schools. The schools, I think I failed to mention the schools that are involved. The Career Center, HB Woodlawn, Washington Liberty, Wakefield High School, Kenmore, and Gunston. And so those are programs that we have identified where the students really could use public transit right now because of their current school transportation. Excuse me, their current school transportation. And plus, as I mentioned earlier, because of our size, because of ART's size, we want to make it successful. And so we have to be very focused on how we roll out and how we check the usage and the data before we can throw open the doors per se. And with the numbers of students that have been really, as I said, doubled earlier or possibly tripled from what was done before, this will give us a good idea to be able to keep our hands around it and to make sure that the pilot is successful. And then that will continue us on to a successful program. So we think we've, I'm so sorry, that we've hit the sweet spot of the number of students that we'll be able to handle and that we think are going to be open to this pretty immediately.
So I hear you on the number. I totally understand the number. What I don't understand is saying we're going to base this on where students live in relation to their school, because that's what I'm hearing. It's the kids who are going to out of boundary schools.
No, just to be clear, and I'll let William jump in. He's the transit service person.
So Jillian, this is where I said earlier in the meeting that delicate balance. One of the things that I will tell you as a professional who took public transit many, many moons ago in another part of the country from 6th grade through high school, one of the things that that school transportation folks and even the transit agencies themselves do not know all of the time is where the student is commuting from. Meaning when they walk out of their door, what's the transit service that's available to them there? And then how many buses will it take, or bus and train, to get to the final destination? So one of the things with the pilot that I would say will help us is we will get to understand what that looks like in terms of the travel patterns. That also is going to help us to understand how many students are making that movement as we go through the pilot. Because of art's size and because it's just art that we're doing this with, we only have 78 buses. We run about 56 of them during the rush hour period. And of course, before the pandemic, you're talking about, okay, we can get 40 passengers on the bus and there's a certain number where it's too many. One of the reasons why we're looking at it from this perspective is that it gives us a way to understand how many more students are going to take transit. We will find out where they're coming from in order to get to the school. Because right now we know the school locations and the bus routes near the schools. If you would have asked me today, the question what I gave earlier in the meeting before you came, Lynn, I gave a hypothetical. If a student is a Wakefield High School student and lives in the South Fairlington neighborhood, chances are they're going to have to take 2 buses, and one of them involves Metrobus to get from out of the neighborhood to Shirlington, to get an art bus to get to Wakefield High School. That's a hypothetical. We do not know at the moment how many. We don't.
Can I just ask a factual question here? Have you guys identified exactly 2,400 students that would take this? Is 2,400 the number of option middle school and high school students plus the number of middle school and high school students that live on the edges, the fringes of their walk zone?
The numbers that we got from APS, they added up from all of those schools to about 2,400. And that's the number that's the number that we used as we were looking for funding on the project.
Is the goal to get 2,400 actually taking art or taking transit? Because here's my concern. Because I know a lot of the people that my kids go to immersion. They're not yet in middle school, but the oldest one's about to be. And so I know a lot of families who are in that category of they go to Gunston, they go to Wakefield, they live across the county. Some of them are not going to take transit because to get to Gunston and Wakefield from north of Langston Boulevard is nearly impossible. And what I'm concerned about is that you've laid out a system where you're going to hand them a transit card and they're just going to stick it back in their pocket and never use it.
And we've thought about that too, Jillian. And so that's why when I mentioned we're going to offer them the excuse me, we're going to offer the students, the ones that have been identified, they're going to be offered this. And you're right, there are some that may not take those cards, but we have to start somewhere. And
But
that's
so
why
are we then going to, because there's a lot of elementary school kids who would be using this, including to get to extended day and home from extended day, and you're not going to get any data on them.
I
There
hear
are a
what you're
lot.
saying. I
So
hear what
are
you're
you
saying.
gonna, and there's a lot of in-boundary kids who go to work who would be using this, who aren't even gonna get an opportunity. So are this, at the end of the day, you're gonna offer the 2,400 to the certain number of kids. Are you gonna turn around and offer the unused cards to other kids, or is this it? They're just gonna sit on a shelf?
You know, with a pilot, you start with your idea and then you start implementing, and then there might be tweaks along the way. So that's what I'm saying to you now. This is who we've identified. If things go completely off and we find out that half of the students are not taking them, then we need to go back and relook how we're doing this and take into consideration the things you're talking about.
Okay, well, I
So-
hope you would also work with, aside from listening to what the board said, which just make this inclusive, I hope you would work with the social workers at the schools. When I started talking about this publicly, a number of social workers reached out to me directly and said, I have 10 kids on a list that I would give transit cards to. And I think you would get them in use a lot faster than what you're proposing.
And here's the other piece of it. I'm glad you mentioned that too. The other pilot we're doing with it, excuse me, is with DHS. And so we've already learned that there may be a number of students there that will have access to these cards. So we're covering a lot of ground right now, but it also means that we possibly might have to tweak some things along the way.
So let me, I want to get Elizabeth in on this, and then, because I want to move us along to the next thing. So Elizabeth, wrap us up on this.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I know that we could all sort of repilot or refix the pilot all day, but that it sounds like y'all have been really thoughtful. I'm really excited about this. And I know that you're very open to what will come in the future. And I just am really grateful that this is getting started. Thank you.
Thank you. Great.
Well, thank you all on this. What I want to do is move us along to the next part. Lynn and William, I wish you all the best on this project. I look forward to seeing the results.
Thank you.
So the Nellie Custis and Military Road roundabout project. So we're going to move through some updates here.
I guess I'll jump in to give you the update. We continue to experience cars knocking our signs down and, still not fully following the channelized traffic there. However, I will say the condition has improved. It reduced from like every day we need to go out there and replace the signs to it's been 2 weeks, it's been standing there. This is the type of behavior that we kind of anticipate. People start to learn the routine, start to know how to negotiate with the new traffic pattern. One more thing to emphasize, because I know some of you may have the same question. We received these questions about how the channelization is not the perfect, the ideal case scenario. We know it isn't because we were under the limitation of some existing utility pole. So as a pilot, we basically did as much as we could. If the pilot proved to be a success and we move into the real construction, it will be redesigned, and many of your feedback about, the curvature, how the signage are, those will be taken into consideration. So we continue to monitor the situation. There has also been question about how long the project gonna stay there, the pilot setup gonna stay there. Right now, we're thinking, because we did communicate with the community about it will be there for 6 to 8 months. And we're thinking if we to make any change, the summer break, the summer school break may be the best time, because we also don't want to have too much impact on the school operation. One more thing I really want to ask this committee's help and also schools' help is, please give us feedback about how school students experience, and how they, especially the kids may walk or bike, how they experience. And any of the things that you think need to be improved could be considered when we do the final design for the actual construction project. So that's as much as I have. We will keep you updated, because we continue to receive comments from both ends. Some people really like it, some really hate it. As pretty much everything we do.
And let's see, and Jillian just put a comment of addressing the concerns with bicycles and the roundabout. So if you just want to put that in your notes of things to go back for consideration. So
Okay.
Safe route. Thank you very much, Wei. Safe routes to school.
Oh, yeah. So I'll just to follow on what Wei said, I think that Kristen had mentioned she was going to check with Ellen Smith at Dorothy Ham Middle School regarding getting some feedback from students, but I'm not sure if she did that. So I'll reach out to her again and again through their CC or through their PTA to see if they have any specific observations or comments from that student perspective. But as far as safe routes to school, I'm very pleased to report that we submitted all of our data from the Student Travel Tally Week collection that was ongoing through October and November, where we asked students how they got to and from school for 2 days over a 1 week period. And it's been something we've been collecting for 8 years now. So it's a good set of data. We can compare schools, we can compare years, we can compare modes. The data for this year will probably be available to us by late January. It goes to a big clearinghouse, and we'll have it available in useful form, hopefully in a couple of weeks. We've also been working closely with Crossing Guards again, and for 2 reasons. One, to celebrate and appreciate, which is Crossing Guard Appreciation Week coming up in February, and the annual Virginia's Most Outstanding Crossing Guard nominations are all coming in. We've already had, I think, about 8 or 9 submitted, so that's always exciting. But we're also working on the nuts and bolts of making sure we have the crossings covered, and when they're not covered, communicating and letting principals know, and then principals letting families know, so that we can do as much as we can with the limited resources we have. And we've been working a lot with our county partners at Walk Arlington and Bike Arlington. With Walk Arlington, we've been working on the Walk Friendly Community application and sharing a lot more from my perspective on the safe routes front than we did back in 2010 when we first applied for that, when I was on the Walk Arlington side of things. So that's very exciting. There's a lot to add there, and hopefully that'll take them to platinum. And on the bike, I don't think it's a bike friendly community, but there's bike data, the bike element data collection that we're trying to get all the details we can and specifics from the last year or so on our bike unit and the number of students who have actually been able to ride bikes despite COVID. So we're working with Leah on that. And then we have some side projects going on. I think we've mentioned that they were in process back at the last meeting, but we are very excited about a pilot walking school bus that will be led by Arlington seniors in partnership with the Department of Parks and Recreation and the 55 Plus program. And that, again, is going to be a pilot at one school at Oak Ridge, but hopefully we'll branch out beyond that. And I think you all know from the terminology, but walking school bus is basically walking with as a group with adults leading, and it works great with the elementary school kids, and more safety in numbers and eyes on the street and all that. And the other exciting news is about the traffic garden grant. We've been doing temporary and pop-up traffic gardens to help teach pedestrian and bike safety, but thanks to Christine, and I think if I'm not sure if we'll have a chance to talk more about it, but there's a grant from the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments that's going to allow us to have traffic garden templates designed for use throughout the region. This is a partnership with Prince George's County as well. So there's a lot of good stuff going on that's kind of on top of the day-to-day, and on top of trying to do as much as we can to make sure Kristen's absence is not too painful for all of us, and that we soon have a succession. So that's all I've got.
Thank you. Vision Zero, we sort of talked about this with the coordinated safety campaign. Do we have anything else to add about slow zones and cameras?
The slow zones around school are being implemented. We actually already have, because we're introducing a lot of new signage, so we already have people assigned going out to do the utility check and everything. So you will gradually see them coming in. The signs will come out first, and the pavement marking, we were planning on doing some work because it was so warm, but then the weather turned on us. So the pavement markings may come a little late. We're also coordinating with PD to help us collect data once we implement the signage and markings, and see if it actually encouraged people to slow down. We have before data collected already, so we will do the before and after analysis once we have everything. In terms of the camera, the speed camera, it is still on agenda for the January board meeting. Once the board passes that ordinance, we will move forward with PD for the implementation. And the implementation side is more a PD led and TNO support effort.
I look forward to all of this. It's exciting what we've seen happen. Oh, Jillian, got a hand?
Yeah, on speed cameras, I thought TENO was leading the development of the equitable policy with the grant, and then police was leading the implementation as far as purchasing the cameras. Is that still correct?
That is correct. We are working using the grant, working with MWCOG to identify basically the engineering guidance of how to identify locations. But in terms of implementation of actually putting up the camera and managing the program, including the ticketing and everything, that is within the police authority.
Just making sure they're not choosing the locations without that
And
guidance.
we work very closely on both ends. We are actually sharing information with each other, collecting feedback and everything. So this is not an isolated effort.
Do we know the timeline on that that equitable guidance?
I think that one we will have to follow the MCOG process. The project is being awarded, I think, and then the COG is actually managing the consultant. They directly hire the consultant to do the analysis. Of course, we as the stakeholder will be in close collaboration and coordination. We're going to be the one that's providing the detailed information from the county side. However, the project is actually directly managed by COG.
Thank you. So the last thing on this part is a TDM update. Lauren, who's driving TDM right now?
I think is Zara on, or I think in the past Sarah's provided that update. No.
I actually don't have anything to report today about TDM. I'm working on launching a staff survey for Escuela Key Elementary in the next couple of weeks. So we're working on that, and otherwise just giving some virtual staff presentations. But yeah, that's about it.
Cool, thank you. The last thing we want to do, and what actually want to do it in flip-flop order here, follow up any previously discussed projects. Wei, did you have anything you wanted to let us know about before we talk about our first intersection?
I don't think I have anything else.
Okay, that's cool. I just wanted to, do things well. And the last thing we are going to talk about here, for just a couple minutes, is the Washington Boulevard. Our next meeting is March 2nd, 2022. I intend to keep these meetings virtual as long as the good people of Arlington County will allow it to stay virtual, because I think it allows more access from a lot more people. Our intersection of the day to talk about is Washington Boulevard at North Quincy Street. Wei, did you have any thoughts that you want to give us on this? Did you want to pull up a Google map on this? How do you want to do this?
I actually have the map ready.
Yes.
And what I will update you on is what sort of recently we have done in terms of supporting school operation. We did turn this intersection, the pedestrian signal, into recall for the morning arrival and the afternoon dismissal time. We start half hour before the bell hour and extend into 15 minutes after, I believe. And I think we actually received a request about there's a hop stop close to here, and school asked us to extend. I think this one is one of those. There were a few locations where school asked us to extend the flashing beacon hours, allow the hop stop students and parents to use longer time, and we have made that adjustment as well. And now I'm gonna yield the floor to you. I think you have some information to share.
I do.
I thought you have some feedback about the safety concern at this intersection.
Oh, well, I was going to open it up to the committee to talk about this intersection and talk about other things, other possibilities with. Sorry, no, I didn't have. Yeah, I'm gonna.
Okay.
I'll steer the comments. But I want to start with any thoughts you had initially on this intersection. And I see John's hand first. So John, let's go. What thoughts do you have on this? Maybe things.
Well, one of the thoughts, I want to compliment the staff on is when you're coming northbound on Quincy Street, there's a no right-hand turn when they're stopped there at the light, which I think is really
no turn
good.
on red.
Yeah, no turn on red, which really protects that crosswalk. And I'm trying to think if it applies to other corners, but it just occurs to me that's a good way to protect some of those pedestrians, is with the no turn on red at a very busy intersection like that one. So I don't know if Wei maybe has a comment on that.
I'm checking out the signs, and I think for Quincy, both south and northbound, there's no turn on red. I think a right turn is allowed for Washington Boulevard turning onto Quincy, and we have the yield to pedestrian signage on the mass arm. Right. Usually when we decide no turn on reds, we do consider both the pedestrian volume, activity level, as well as the vehicular volume level. So I think for this intersection, this seems to be a reasonable reasonable plan.
Okay, and one other comment is just when you're coming eastbound on Washington Boulevard, you have that little stub lane that goes off to the right that pulls off a lot of the right turn traffic. So there shouldn't be a lot turning right immediately at the corner.
Correct. I will say, Josh, I don't know if that's the reason you have this intersection on your agenda. We did hear from Kristen before she leave. She actually mentioned about there were parents talking about sometimes they observe big vehicle trucks hopping the curb. I will tell you, Dennis, once he heard about it, Dennis is my patrol person because he does a lot of walking in Arlington. He went outside and checked this intersection, all four corners, and came back, we didn't receive any detail about which corner is the parent reporting. But Dennis, I think you have some observation. Do you want to share with them?
Sure. So on the southwest corner, there were some tire marks on the combined ADA ramp serving both crosswalks.
Southwest.
Yeah, you got to spin it around.
So
Let's
this
see.
one.
Yes, it's actually, well, it's going from Washington Boulevard, turning south on the Quincy. Pivot around a little bit more. There we go. Where that metro, right there. And the vehicle should not be cutting the corner because there is a dedicated bus stop. It's not a travel lane, and then there is a wide bike lane. So there's really no reason for a vehicle to cut that corner, but we can look at that. And that was the only thing I saw. The only other corner that it's really possible to hop the curb is on the W&L corner, and that was built as part of the W&L project. So those are the two corners that may be at issue.
So Dennis, I did look at this leg, and because I noticed that we didn't do anything for this corner, this seems to be a corner with some basically property availability challenge, and also with the catch basin here, that may be why in the past we didn't do anything here.
I think that's right. It's got a whole lot of utility constraints, and that corner catch basin makes it really hard to rebuild that without
catch basin, fire hydrant, and everything, and the utility pole in the middle of the sidewalk. This is not ideal condition again. And should there be any future improvement, I would say we could also consider maybe make accordingly modification on this side, because if we have an opportunity to realign this crosswalk, then that would give us an opportunity to do away from this type of sort of corner ramp instead of pull them more apart. But again,
the only other thing I would mention, Wei, for the good of the group, is this intersection did feature curb ramp rebuilds as part of the signal replacement project. And if you could pivot around.
Yeah, that's the bus stop that here.
We used to have a very large, probably a 12-foot lay-by lane adjacent to the travel lane on Washington Boulevard, and that was all filled in and has become sidewalk and provides an ample place for the bus stop. So that all used to be vehicular pavement.
One other question that I had on that intersection where you talked about the easement issues where the fire hydrant was, and forgive my noviceness of it, because I once owned a house in another state that had the fire hydrant was in the middle of my grass and I had to mow around it. The not that one, the other corner.
This
that had yeah, right there. Can that fire hydrant be relocated to the grass without an easement, or does that require an easement? Like,
it requires easement if that's private property.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, and you can bet money that property line is at the back of that sidewalk.
Okay. I was just thinking of anything that could be done, and even if that fire hydrant was moved right up to the cement that little arch thing, that would at least, because the problem right now is you've got like 1 foot and 5 and 4 foot. If you moved it over, you at least get something slightly wider for people to pass through. Of course, I don't know how much money it would take to move a fire hydrant 4 feet.
Yes, I will say if we are able to come up with a project that can maybe, including do something about the utility poles and stuff. Projects like this is I will say the worst type any engineering folks want to face is you only make very minor change on the surface. It's a lot of cost because of what's underneath and what's next to it.
That's
If you
fair.
look at the manhole is here, the catch basin is here, that tells me there's probably like a big pipe underneath. So an inch on the surface may cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that is not, I mean, even if you got money, you also need support from these properties in order to do that.
Oh, sure. Right. And I'm sure, you know, inch by inch, it's been taken over the years, and I'm sure at this point some of them are not so interested.
This is not a
Jillian
good
and
condition.
John.
So, John and I both live relatively near here. The if you look on the opposite side of the street from that problematic corner, on the opposite side of Quincy, you notice that there's parking spaces there. And one thing that was discussed when we were discussing putting protected bike lanes on Quincy.
We have done the bike lane update actually along Quincy, and you probably remember, I think that was about only 2 years or so ago. And for every place where we can possibly provide protected bike lane, I think up north we did some of those. We have grabbed every location that we can possibly do, including this side. I think we've done as much as we can.
Sorry, just I froze there. Can I, am I back on?
Yes.
So
go ahead.
back when the county did look at the bike lanes here, we were told that there would be another opportunity to look at this block once the Ed Center was done, and we were looking at restriping this block. We were told that this block, that they left the parking configuration the way they did and left the dangerous bike lane the way they did because there would be this future opportunity to look at this block. I happen to know a former school board member's kids would bike to school on this street. This is a heavily used route to bike to school. So it would be a heavily used protected bike lane. I know there are children now who convert over to the sidewalk because
Yeah,
it is not
Jillian, I will just chime in that the agreement was that North Quincy Street would be repaved. The repaving got pushed off in this section until after the Ed Center construction was done. And then that protected bike lane design would be brought back up.
Right. So hopefully we can think about that. When we do decide about the bikes, it would be nice to have a green bike lane painted through this intersection in both directions, because I do think those green lanes help drivers remember to look before turning.
Well, I'm writing down your suggestion. Again, once this Ed Center construction finishes and we, bring this plan back, we can look at our design plan and add on final touches.
Yeah, and maybe when we look at it, we can consider whether, because I think if you reallocate some of the space from parking, there is an option to actually bring out the sidewalk on the east side and realign everything.
I can honestly tell you, when we bring back the bike lane, that would be part of the repaving the road and marking. If we want to consider bring out the edge line of the sidewalk, that will turn that into a whole new project, and that's going to probably look at much longer time on that. So I would suggest us actually taking the opportunity of repaving and marking first without delaying that.
That does make sense, but maybe when we think about how we allocate the space, we can think about future opportunities too.
Let me jump in here because I want to get John's thoughts in on this project too as we get closer to wrapping up.
Yeah, the comment I have is as we look at the intersection here, you can see some of the crosswalks are very freshly painted, like the one to the left in this picture you can't see, but the one to the right is pretty faint. So in terms of making intersections like this safer, is keeping those stripes brightly painted white so that it really stands out to motorists that, hey, this is a crosswalk, and not let them fade away. So that one you're seeing there on the left's a little more faded away.
Yes.
The second thing go ahead.
John, I believe this portion of Washington Boulevard is still VDOT. So this is the places where we keep reminding them to refresh the paints. I will say VDOT does not refresh the paints as much, as often as we do. And so I will add on this to sort of request list for us to coordinate with them.
Okay, great. Thank you. And just one other comment I have is just east of here, where there's two major construction projects going on the north side of Washington Boulevard, from Kirkwood up to the Giant Food. The road condition down there, the surface of the road is a total disaster. And it's really tough for just cars to get through there, but it's, you know, it's a nightmare for pedestrians. But I just wonder how we let them get away with such a horrible road condition. And I'll compare that with the road condition up on Lee Highway, where they're putting in the new building next to Cowboy Cafe. That one was repaved early in the process, and it's a nice smooth road right now. So I'm just curious how we let them linger with such a poor road condition that's just full of potholes for so long.
John, I will take that back to our permitting section and have them follow
Okay.
up.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
So Wei,
Yes.
I appreciate you taking our feedback on this project. I understand as soon as you say VDOT, I understand the logistical pain of trying to coordinate all kinds of things together with. So thank you. And I really do believe that I feel like this committee gives you some extra backing into doing projects that maybe you otherwise wouldn't. And I think it's great when the schools and the county work together for the benefit of everyone, because when I go to different places and talk about one of the things this committee does, because crosswalks for schools are then crosswalks for parks and recreational activities throughout the day and the week.
Well, thank you. This committee is very helpful, helping us identify priorities and sort of, supporting school kids. That is a priority for us. And I will say we have been making some progress coordinating with VDOT as well. For example, on Glebe Road, when they finally repaved Glebe and did some of the marking, we actually worked with them to ask for permission to add in some marking that Arlington implements, but VDOT does not necessarily do it in other locations. So we are getting that. There are places, for example, the 5-corner intersection on Lee Highway and Quincy, where we painted green. We actually went through all the effort to get VDOT to approve our plan, give us permit to do that. But I have to say, we sometimes have to make a decision on, is the project worth taking, all those months to go through, or is that something that maybe is slightly lower on the priority list? That is where this committee's, I will say, input and feedback really help us to identify those. So thanks everyone here.
And Wei, if you have intersections that ever bubble up to you that you would love for us, or Dennis, that you'd love us to discuss, please send me a message. I would love to include intersections that maybe you think don't get enough attention in this town, or that maybe we've missed thinking about. So
very good. We'll take you up on that.
Please, seriously, we're all in this together, because I say schools for parks, but you can say parks for schools. It works both ways. So with that, if I'm not missing anything on our agenda, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And that was John Carden with a second from
Elizabeth Taker.
Second.
Everybody seconded right there.
Second.
So Lauren, choose Elizabeth seconded. We'll say that. And with that, I thank you all. I wish you a safe time. I know things are challenging right now from an education and a health standpoint, none of us operate in a vacuum, and I hope your families all stay safe and healthy as we move through the next little while. So thank you.
You
Thank you.
too. Stay safe and
Thank you,
healthy.
Josh.
Thanks,
you.
everyone. Have a good
Thank
night.
you.
everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Year.
Happy New Year. Stay safe.
So,
Happy New Year.
Lauren, if you will stop the recording, and then I'll walk you through something.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just shared a Google Doc of my notes to you two. So that's it.
Oh,
Thank you.
No problem. Let me know if there's any